Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Castles by the Sea from Otherwise Games. Castles by the Sea is a 1 to 4 player game which players are slowly trying to assemble sand castles. Sort of. Thematically, I think that's what you're doing, but practically speaking, across a variable number of rounds of play, specifically 4 to 6 rounds depending on the player count, players are going to be taking sand blocks and putting them down into this shared space on the table over here. Players are going to be taking these blocks and putting them here to construct certain patterns and layouts in which they can then take their people and their structures, putting them into there to score points. That's the basic idea. Meanwhile, you're trying to be mindful of the hazards that are going to rip apart your sandcastles, the adorable hazards that are the giant, the terror, and the dragon, otherwise known as the baby over here. The baby's going to be the giant. We have the dragon, which is a kite, and we have the terror, which is a giant dog. So very, very cute thematically speaking as far as how this game operates. But with that, let's go ahead and talk about, well, how this game operates. So in the game, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be following a sequence which is handily printed on your player board. You're going to be gathering 3 sand every turn and then reclaiming. Reclaiming means that as these various hazards knock things over in the game, you're going to be able to trade in some of those pieces to get extra sand blocks, a compensation as it were for having your sand castles torn down. Then from there, once you've done that, so again 3 in the first round, possibly more in subsequent rounds, you're going to build the blocks. Now when you build the blocks onto the board, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking the blocks, putting them on any spot on the board, and then every block you place that round has to be touching a block you place that round. You cannot place them separately, so there's no sitting here and creating a little structure like this so you can place your thing in between that. That's simply not going to happen. But what you can do is you can start taking advantage of others' things or your own things on future turns. So for this first turn, let's try to keep it plain and simple. Let's try to get some seaweed while we're at it, because why not? Seaweed's going to be worth points in the game. So you know what? Let's go. I don't see a way to get 3 seaweed. I don't see a way to get it. So we can get 1 seaweed in the game. We're going to go ahead and get 1 seaweed. We will put this down like so. There we go. There we go. We're done. We put it like that. We knocked it down. 3 different pieces onto the board. And now we got a seaweed, which is worth 2 points. And also we're taking advantage of the stones over here. Why? Not entirely sure why. It won't actually help us. Should I just try to go for, you know what? We're just going to try to get our princess in play. I like getting the princess in play. I find it's very helpful. So we're just going to do that over there. And that way, what we're going to do is we're actually going to be able to do 2 things over here. We're going to be able to take our princess and put it down over there on top of that structure, because the princess requires that it's on top of a pillar with nothing around it. You can't have anything around it this round. This round, because these blocks are white, versus some of them show red blocks, which means nothing can be there ever once that piece is built. But additionally, we can also build a door, because a door over here, the door has to go in between 2 blocks, and yes, stones on the board count as blocks. We're going to put the door in over here, and there you go. The door is now in place, and we now have that over there. Then we go to, that's phase 3, placing pieces. We now go to phase 4, scoring rewards. I'll get 1, 2, 3 sand dollars, and the game starts off slow because the first round of play, you're just starting to build things into the game, but as the game progresses, you're going to get more and more points because you're able to get things out onto the board faster than they're coming off, usually. Depends on the hazards. Then we go to phase 5 over here where we do the hazards. This is where it's always a drop confusing. On a regular basis, I have a hard time getting people to fully process how this works. But the hazards are all going to work in a different way. But the main thing to know is that one hazard will be moved and will not happen, and the other hazards will flip their cards and may happen. So to that end, looking at the hazards on the table, the terror over here, looking at the card, the terror rips up all blocks in the zone in front of it, which means it's not really a threat to us. The dragon will take off the top 2 layers in the entire row, but it will never touch the bottom layer. But that means that our princess and the sand block she's standing on is in danger. Versus the giant over here will take all the people out of his row, so again, the princess, but not her sand block, are in danger. To that end, we're going to go ahead and move the dragon, hoping the dragon, let's actually, these by the way, the truth is, I'm realizing now, nope, I did it correctly. The dragon's going to move over there, circle around the board, and not move, but the giant is going to go ahead and activate, and it's going to draw 2 pips over here. The cards range from 0 to 3 pips, and once you have a collective 3 pips, you go ahead and trigger the action of that character. So for right now, the giant's safe, it's not going to hurt us. Going back to the cards over here, we're also going to impact the terror. The terror has a single pip, which means again, it won't activate, it won't do anything bad to us. We are fine, we are good to go. That is a round. Meanwhile, we'll have another player go. So let's simulate another player, just for the sake of having this conversation. We're going to have somebody else put some blocks on the board, and they're going to go ahead and also try to get their hands on some seaweed. You know, they might tend to take a slightly different approach. So they're going to go over here like so, and now that they're over there, they'll take their own seaweed, and they'll take 2 of their own people. Maybe they'll take their archers. Their archers is actually a good idea. They're going to pop 2 archers down on the board because they can do so like this, but then they can't put the princess on top because the archers are in the way, but they will be able to get their archers. Archers need to be next to a block on a wall. So on a wall next to a block, as these are, and that's all you can really do over here. You can't get anything else in play, at least not based on the way these things currently are. Although I wonder, you probably could put a tower in play. You can probably put a tower in play. Let's go ahead and grab a tower for that green player and put a tower into play on top, because a tower needs to be on top of a block. I'm not confident It must have at least 2 open walls adjacent to it. No, it needs to have, I'm wrong. It needs to have 2 adjacent walls adjacent to it, so it can't go there. The tower would have to go where this is, and then unfortunately could not have anything over there. So that's going to be the other player. They'll score, they'll do their points. We go to the next round. It's now our turn. We move this along, and now it's time for us to once again grab some blocks. Let's pretend that they moved. They wanted the dragon to activate. So actually, in fact, on their turn, they probably would have left the giant to activate because it's good for them. They probably would have moved the terror because this is actually a terrible place to build in hindsight. So we're going to move the terror. I'm going to have the dragon activate on their turn. The dragon's going to have 1 pip, and the giant, please be no pips, please be no pips, please be. It is not no pips. So unfortunately, the giant's going to activate and tear down our princess, completely destroying her, and she's going to go over here. She will not be able to score points for us next round, but we're going to leave her over here until we resolve our start of turn, which is, coincidentally enough, right now. Start of turn, we're going to look. We have a piece over here. Now, we won't get any compensation because you get the compensation you get in terms of extra sand blocks is equal to the number of pieces divided by 2, rounded down. So 1 piece divided by 2, rounded down, is 0. You can have a little pattern or a little chart on your board that shows you exactly how many pieces you need as far as destroyed pieces in order to actually get those things. But again, for right now, it's kind of immaterial. She'll return over there, and we'll continue the process of trying to build out our epic, amazing, sprawling kingdom. Maybe. Let's go ahead and build a door. So I'm going to go ahead and build a door right now. Let's put these in play. There's no great places to build a door. I could do that one there, but then he'll probably take advantage. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put one down over here. So we're going to put a door down over here. We may hold on to this block. Let's take a look and see. We're going to place our monument into play over here. We can only place things. Here's the tricky part. You can only place things into play whenever it actually has an impact on something next to it. So for example, what we actually could do, now I'm thinking about it, if we go... No, we won't be able to. I'm cheating. I'm lying. Never mind. Ignore me. But over here, so we're going to place this over here because of the adjacency rule, which tricks people up a lot. But we can't put something down. Like, I can't put my princess down here because I didn't put this block out this round. And I can't put another block here because you can only place your blocks touching each other. Which means I could put this block down over here in order to get my archer on the board and my tower on the board. So I got a little bit of progress there. But that's all I can do at that point. And so right now, I'm going to look. I'm going to get 1, 2... over here, 1, 2, 3 over here, so we can get a total of 3 pieces. This is the wrong side, I'm realizing. That should be the arch. I have the arch in play. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 points over there for this. The arch over here needs to go between 2 pillars and have nothing in front or back of it. And that's going to be how you play through that. You're going to score our points, we'll trigger our hazards, but that should be enough of an idea to show you how to play. But to talk about the review, but before we do, let's talk about the castle cards. The castle cards are cards that you're going to have 3 of these dealt to you at the beginning of the game, and you can score 2 of these 3 cards. So over here looking at these cards, at any point when you achieve certain things, if I make the spire, if I take 2 sand blocks and I make this giant spire that I then load my princess onto later getting more points, but when I make that spire I can play this card and get 3 points. Similarly, when you make the gate over here you can get 5 points, or if you place 5 pieces in one turn you can get 5 points, but you can only score 2 of these in the game, so choose carefully which ones you think are most achievable and or worth the most points as you try to get the extra points from that. But that's basically the game. Across the rounds of play, 4 to 6 rounds, depending on the player count. And that just decrease in player count and in rounds is because the more players you have on the board, the more sand blocks are being thrown onto the board. Even as things are torn apart by the various hazards in play, generally more things are entering the board than being torn apart. And so that aspect of being able to build off of what others are doing in the game is going to be very present. And so the more players there are, the fewer rounds you need to be able to get things out and score as efficiently as possible. Plus, of course, general amount of time the game will take. But that's basically it. Across those 4 to 6 rounds, place pieces, gather sand, place pieces, build blocks, place pieces, score points, trigger hazards, rinse and repeat until the end of the game. The game board does change slightly depending on player count as well, but that is basically everything you have here, with the caveat that I'll say as well, that you also have additional hazards and cards in play. Meaning, right now we have 3 hazards over here, but there are really 6 hazards. 6 hazards means that if you're choosing any 3 hazards from 6 hazards, the math on that is, what is that, 6 times 5? 6 times 5 times 4 times 3? I think that's the math. I think that's the math that is, maybe. It's a set of 3 things from a set of 6. I think it's 6. I don't know the exact math on that, whatever the math is, but there's a bunch of different ways that the various hazards can combine to give you a large variety. And then just as importantly, over here, each of these cards that you have, each of the cards that you have in play representing these 6 different pieces you have is double-sided, and there are 2 of them, meaning there are 4 possible combinations for each of those. And that math I could do. That is 4 to the 6th power, I think. So it's 4 times 4, which is 16, 64, 256, 1024, 4096. Does that sound right? That sounds right. I think there's 4096 possible combinations of the ways you can have the different various characters in play. Either way, let's go ahead and move on to the review, starting off with ease of play. The game is not that hard to get into. In fact, if you got the rulebook and you opened it up and you were intimidated by like the 25 pages it is, it's like 23 pages this rulebook is, it's really not 23 pages. Once you open up and go through the initial setup or the initial components and all that, you're talking about 4 pages of rules. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5th, 5 and 6 over there, 5 and 6, 7 pages of rules. 7 pages of rules. The rest of the 22 pages are setup, the clarifications on cards, the FAQ, the solo mode, all these other things to go through. So if you got this rulebook and you were intimidated by it, give it another shot. It's 7 pages of very clear rules as far as actually getting it up and running. Game plays in around 45 to 60 minutes. Generally, there's a little bit, it does depend on player count, even though they decrease the number of rounds, but in general, you're placing blocks out, thinking through your turn. I think if you're going really quickly, you can go under 45, but I'd expect around 45 to 60. Box says, I'm always intrigued, box says 30 to 45. I think 30's pushing it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm always wondering, but either way. Anyways, diving into the actual review, starting off with what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. Starting off with what I like, which is the sheer variability here. The sheer variability as far as the actual number of cards in play, and the terrorism, the hazards you have in play, and that just means that there's so many ways to engage in the actual game. There's so many different combinations of things to go through as far as, okay, great, this is the puzzle I have to go through with these characters, what about with these 3? What if you flip these 2 cards and those do those 2 cards? You have so much variability with the way the different structures, the wizards, the princesses, the way they all interact, and the way they need to be put onto the board, and therefore the way you and the other players at the table are going to build different structures. Every single game has the same core concept, but the way it executes differently based on the hazards and the cards is vastly different game to game. Additionally, this board just looks fun to build up. As you're going through the board, as you have players sitting there and building out their structures, the way this will develop is incredibly cool to actually watch happen, especially if you're playing at larger player counts. Smaller player counts, you might focus a bit more in certain areas, but at larger player counts, you're going to be all over the place and just be building a ton of things, and watching the area develop and sometimes being torn down as well is very fun to go through. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, the hazards, I'm not the biggest fan of them. I understand why they need to exist, and there's a tempo to this game, and the tempo does exist that you are slowly getting things out, but in the later rounds of play, you will have most of your things out, and then they'll be knocked back in, and you can put them back out. It gets a little easier to keep things out as the game progresses. That's even with the hazards. And so with no hazards in play, you would just be able to get everything done all the time with no problems whatsoever, which takes away some of the fun from the game. The problem is the way the hazards currently are executed. I don't think my problem is with the hazards and the fact that they could tear things down. I think my problem is the way the hazards are executed almost feels very luck-based as you go through it, and doesn't feel rewarding. I don't feel clever when I avoided a hazard, and I don't feel like it was fair when a hazard hits me. Because of the random nature of the card flip, it just feels like, hey, we had to remove blocks, so like, we'll flip some cards and have bad things happen, and maybe it happens to you, maybe it happens to your teammates. It's not like you really plan around it. I understand the need to have things torn down. I wish there was more control and less luck over it. Luck might be more thematic, but it takes away from my experience personally as a player in this particular case. I'll also say that there's just generally a lack of interesting decisions. In general, as I play through this game and I put things out, I find that the initial decisions of putting things out are kind of just carrying me through the entire game. To me, this is not a game of tough optimization, and part of that is because of how restricted you are in the way you place your blocks, and because of how few blocks you have round to round. There's just not a ton of room for like, oh, look at these clever moves I'm going to have. It doesn't happen to me as I play. I find that the most interesting turns are actually when my things get destroyed, and when I save the block from last round, which means I'm now walking into this round with 6 blocks, and I have a lot to think about how I place things. That actually gives me a room in a turn where I feel things are more interesting and more clever. Most of my turns in Castles by the Sea, though, felt more procedural and less clever as I went through them. And the gameplay is very repetitive in the nature of the sequencing. The fact that every single round you go through that same process of 3 blocks, put them out, replace the things that got torn down. It does have a very repetitive cycle to how it plays out, as opposed to feeling a stronger sense of growth and development. It kind of feels like you're in a pattern and you repeat that pattern until you get to the end. It didn't feel overly rewarding as far as the core structure of what the game is doing. As far as I can see others not liking, as far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, it's very easy to play illegally in this game. First of all, in general, the hazards are always hard. I find players struggle with that aspect that you move a hazard, and that's the hazard you don't activate, and the other ones you do activate, and they may hit you. I find players generally struggle with that as I'm teaching through the game, and players constantly mess it up as they're thinking through how to avoid or how to interact with the hazards. It's just not immediately intuitive. I'll also say that the way the blocks are placed out, there's this instinctive desire to place blocks where you want as opposed to having them touch. And then you have the aspect of everything you place onto the onto the table that round has to touch one of the existing blocks, and I find I'm constantly catching players mess those rules up no matter how many times I teach them. Something about those placement aspects are just not as intuitive as I would like. The concept of like, hey, you have to put something down on a piece you place this turn is like fine. Like it's a concept we see in Carcassonne. You only place your meeple on the tile you place this turn. But that's much more set and direct as far as how it operates. Because we're operating here with like, you know, sides and surfaces and placing other things, like it's not as immediately intuitive, and I find players struggle with it a bit more and inevitably will mess up and you have to catch them with it. I'll also say that some people may not like the fact that you're playing on a shared board means you're inherently setting up other players with your moves. As I sit there and I build this pillar for my princess to be on over here, the next player comes along and sits there and then builds their gate and puts their gate into play. And that aspect, you have to be okay with that because you are working on a shared board. If you're not willing to build out your stuff, well, you won't get very many points for it. But if you do build out your stuff, you might be setting up others for even better, easier turns. And so there's that mental thought process of, I'm just helping you, which you have to be okay with if you're playing this game. As far as final thoughts on Castles by the Sea, I was looking forward to this game a lot. I really wanted to like it. I like point-scoring puzzles, and I love point-scoring puzzles with variability to it, and Castles by the Sea nails the variability. It nails the variability a lot as you go through it, with the caveat that the variability is not necessarily as much as you might think. Sometimes a card is not meaningfully different. So, for example, even just this arch versus the monument over here, same basic structure. This one's elevated by 1, gets 1 less points, but you get the placement bonus. So it does have the additional puzzle of you actually kind of want the monument to get destroyed by the dragon or whatnot, so that you can then rebuild it because you get 3 points when you build it. So there are small things like that you can trigger. But then again, that I find frustrating with the luck aspect of, will the dragon activate this round or not? I don't have as much control as I would like to think I do. And so I find that Castles by the Sea, the main problem I have with it is that the core puzzle of what you're doing, I don't find rewarding enough. The way the hazards are executed, I find kind of annoying and not particularly engaging. And so the net result is a game that I really want to like, and it has the variability of a game that I mean, there's so much variability. I want to dive into it more. Even with my critiques, there's still variability. There's still fun things going on here. But the core puzzle to me, I don't find intriguing enough, and the hazards I find annoying. And that combination means I'm left with a game that there's what to like here, but not enough for me. For me, this game is a 2.5 out of 5, and even then, the 0.5 is only because of the variability. I still want to try different combinations and try other things. The first game I tried, and then, you know, basic recommended combination, then I was like, you know what, maybe I need something more interesting, and so I tried another pairing, and then this didn't change it up enough for me as far as my core experience. But I still want to try more variability, more options, and see, like, you know, if I try these 3 hazards and these 6 cards, maybe that'll be interesting. So that's the 0.5 for me. But this game is I wanted to like this. I wanted to like Castles by the Sea, but unfortunately this one did not work for me quite as well as I was hoping. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Reef. If you're looking for a game that does give you that shared pool as you try to accomplish different goals by placing down different pieces, I think Reef does it in a much simpler, this game's easy enough to understand, but I think Reef does it in a simple package that is engaging to play through. And if you're looking for something which you're building out your own private cities and you don't have other players messing with you, but a lot, and again, all that variability to the nines as well, Tiny Towns, with or without the many expansions, will give you that as well. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.